Hey y'all, welcome to session 13. Gonna save the excited intro this week because unfortunately we're gonna start the episode off on a somber note. So if you've seen the news that famous NHL hockey player, Columbus Blue Jacket, Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew were killed while bicycling by a drunk driver. So we're gonna use him to honor as the BHoF Hall of Fame inductee this week, a well-deserving candidate regardless of what happened. We're gonna transition into an interview with my buddy Ethan Green, a summer camp friend of mine, to learn about interpersonal effectiveness, our final module of the DBT block. Very exciting. Y'all have worked hard. Y'all have earned yourself considered to be skilled in DBTs if you've been watching this whole time. So interpersonal effectiveness, meaning like how to get your way in conversations, how to make sure that you're able to advocate for yourself, stand up to peer pressure, things like that. Finally, we'll talk about the word judge, judgment, feeling judged, why it hits us so hard, what the root of that is, and if we're feeling judged, what we can do to learn from that moment and not react so strongly. And if we are the judger, what we can do to take stock in that moment and really resonate with the concept of when we're feeling judgmental, let's be curious instead. All right, y'all, let's ride. Starting the show on a somber note this week, as our BHoF Hall of Fame inductee will be Johnny Gaudreau, an NHL hockey player who's most recently playing for the Columbus Blue Jackets, Columbus, Ohio, and my favorite NHL team. If you haven't seen what happened in the accident, it's truly tragic. So feel free to move on if you feel like this will concern you. But Johnny and his brother Matthew were riding bicycles on a busy county road in New Jersey the night before their sister was set to be married the next day, and they were struck from behind by a drunk driver, killing them both. And so, Johnny was, born and raised in New Jersey. Johnny was a superstar growing up and even earned the title Johnny Hockey growing up and into his college years. Played hockey at Boston College and won the Hobie Baker Award as the best player in college. He then signed with the Calgary Flames in 2014. In 2016, he was voted by his peers, as the Lady Byng Memorial Trophy as the NHL's most gentlemanly player. He did charitable work in Alberta, the province where Calgary is located in Canada, including gaining lots of donations to an organization called Kids Sport Calgary, which raised money for low SES families to be able to play sports. As we all know, hockey is an extremely expensive sport and often cost prohibitive to families without those kinds of means. He was also the face of Alberta Children's Hospital's Build Them Up campaign, which was all about adolescent mental health. He would come to the hospital, he would be there, and consistently was the face of the program, really valuing mental health. In the offseason in 2022, he shocked the world by signing a contract with those Columbus Blue Jackets, who traditionally have not been very good at hockey, and people wondered why he went there. He explained that he chose to go to Columbus because it's known as a great place to raise a family. Family being a big priority, as he and his wife Meredith were married the year before in 2021. They went on to have their daughter in 22 and a son in 2024. So just wanted to recognize this, not only because Johnny Hockey himself was a beloved NHL player and fans really endeared themselves to him given his personality and, again, gentlemanly reputation that he had as both a great husband, father, and person. And so an appropriate BHoF Hall of Fame inductee either way. So we're going to come back after the break here and talk about interpersonal effectiveness with my buddy Ethan. But first, in lieu of our usual music, we'll take a moment of silence into the transition. Who day?
Hey, baby.
Who day think gonna beat them Bengals?
Go Bucks.
Who day? Go Bucks. So let's go ahead and assume that the Bucks got their first win over AK Rowdy last week. Time flash forward, I'll be in Columbus to see Western Michigan. Ethan, if you want to come into town, welcome. My first fellow Bengals fan on the show, a good childhood friend of mine, Ethan Green. Grew up in what's the Cincinnati suburb of Dayton, about an hour north of Cincinnati. Ethan will not like that I called that a Cincinnati suburb. As we talk about frat boys, Ethan was actually in my fraternity's rival fraternity in college. That's right. There were more than one of them on Ohio State's campus, and that's okay. We've retained a friendship. Being from Southwest Ohio, he is, of course, a big Bengals fan. Who day? Let's go. An Ohio State Buckeyes fan. Ethan works in restaurant technology. So as he explained it, all the menus you look at in the drive-thru at McDonald's, that's him and his homies. And Ethan, introduce yourself to the crowd. What do you like to do to help yourself with your mental health? What are some of your favorite coping skills?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I've definitely been an avid listener over the course of the past few months. And I have to just reiterate two things. Hooday. And
Who
I
dat?
always like to tell people that Cincinnati is my favorite suburb of Dayton, Ohio. But with that said, as far as how I like to cope with my mental health and mental well being, it's honestly super simple. I'm a huge bookworm. I'm a big science nerd, space nerd. I love sports, and so I really make it a point to, no matter what, get outside for at least an hour a day. It's usually more than that because I have a dog that I'm walking, but going on walks and just allowing myself to kind of escape from reality and dive into some weird, cool sci-fi story, or learn about space science, stuff like that,
I
or jam out to a little Grateful Dead and Fish,
Yeah.
and that's it's really important.
The music stuff is so great. And I think I hear more and more music stuff. And last week I tried to use a little bit more music, and we'll keep trying to do that on the show. Can't play it. Spotify doesn't like that. Ethan used a great word there, nerd. I don't know if we've talked about it
Uh-huh.
yet, but I realized at some point, maybe in our early 20s, Ethan, that I was a sports nerd. We'd use the word nerd in such a negative way. And then you learn that a nerd is just a fanatic about whatever. So you can be a Star Wars, Star Trek nerd, a Grateful Dead nerd, a sports nerd. And that was that moment to be like, oh, you're just obsessive about something. You're interested in it. And so, like, since then, I've just been asking people, what kind of nerd are you? What are you nerdy
Yeah.
about? And so I really like to use that there because it's such a good way to kind of bridge that gap and use that word properly.
Oh my gosh.
Nerd out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the word nerd and the nerd weird are two words that I know for a fact in my current relationship, and also relationships previously, that like the ability to see how someone reacts to hearing someone that you're potentially growing a relationship with, whether it's friendship or more intimate. I think it allows somebody to see the real you, a genuine you. So I think that's one reason why it's important. And if you can have a like-minded partner or friend that is so open and willing to be like, oh yeah, no, I'm a huge nerd about X, Y, or Z. So
Yeah.
I think that fosters an opportunity for a stronger connection to have with somebody. But at the same time, it allows you to be someone, if whether or not you're a super social person, outgoing, or you're somebody that's more of an introvert. If you're out and you're able to talk to people about things that they like, that might be socially at large considered nerdy, you're going to learn a lot more throughout life, which personally I think that's where it's helped me a lot. Is I've
Yeah.
just picked up some super random facts that I've gotten to learn by somebody that I never would have expected to. But at the same time, like, it's a cool feeling to be able to be in a position where you can see someone's eyes like light up because they get to talk to you about something I could never
So
fathom learning about.
So very Midwestern of you, Ethan, to want to go up on the street and just talk to someone about something based on their shirt they're wearing. Let's remember that not everybody's from Ohio. Not everybody does that. Now, you and I have taken
That's
that to
great.
Illinois and now Colorado. To reiterate the topic today, Ethan, no surprise hearing him talk for the first five, we're doing interpersonal effectiveness. All right. That's basically how to say, basically how to win friends and influence people. This is the final module of our DBT block. And why this is so important in terms of DBT is the kind of person who signs up to need DBT is a person who has a hard time advocating for themselves. They might get railroaded in relationships. They might be in difficult relationships that are imbalanced. And so the skills that we're going to be learning today all revolve around some examples. We're going to maintain self-respect. We're going to maintain healthy relationships. We're going to learn how to self-advocate and how to build empathy. Those are just some examples, right? We need to all be doing that stuff. So we'll get into those details a little more in a minute. Ethan, I want you to talk on first. I know Ethan was introduced as a fan of the show to me after the first intro when I believe his quote on Instagram was, "Therapy is tight," all caps on tight. And so I knew I had a future KGB in Ethan. So what's been your experience with therapy, and how would you talk about it to maybe people that are interested?
Yeah, I forgot that was what I
Therapy's
said.
tight.
Tight. Therapy is tight. It's something that was not a part of my life until 2019. I've always been obviously aware of it, but I think I was somebody that was not actually listening to what I had been reading about and learning to be true. And also what I'd be preaching, because it's, I have close friends and family members that have been going to therapy for a long time. And so I felt like I was putting myself in a position where I got to practice what I preach. And so in 2019, this was leading into to pandemic times, but I had been really, I'd say in my first, a position in my first like true big impactful period of my professional growth. And with that, came successes, a lot of learning, but also like some serious stress that I'd not been used to in the past.
Were you a manager of people for the first time? Was that what was different, or just more asked of you? Because that's a big change when you're asked to be a more of a if you have direct reports. That's a big change for somebody in their career, and especially in their 20s, like you were.
Totally. So actually, no, I did not have direct reports at the time. But what I did do was I really played to what I know are my strengths and my skill sets in an organization that is growing. And I want to be ambitious. I want to be able to gravitate towards opportunities that either I'm creating or I could see being an opportunity down the line in work. And so what the reason I'm saying all that is because I sort of like was able to manifest success in a particular, with a particular product, a particular customer set within an industry. And while I was having a blast and I was getting to be looped into more, impactful conversations with important stakeholders, both internally and externally, like I didn't really realize the stress that came with it. And so I kind of hit a point where I started to realize I was feeling anxiety. And it got to a point that I talked to my girlfriend at the time and some close friends that already were going to therapy. And it just turned to this point of like, what am I doing? Like if people that I know, I think are smarter than me and healthy, both physically, but most importantly, mentally, like, shouldn't I list, like, shouldn't that mean something to me? And so I finally did my first call, to a therapy center, and I lucked out big time. And I really want to speak to this too. But I had my first session with somebody that in my mind was who I wasn't sure if was be the right fit for me.
Sure.
But as soon as I had my first session, it truly felt like I think the way I actually explained it was like, it felt like I had a cup of coffee, I had a 12-hour perfect night of sleep, and I also went to like a cold plunge all at the same time when I left my first session. And it was something that I realized was like not only something that made me feel just like relaxed and like 10 pounds off my shoulders,
Sure.
but it made me realize that like this is something that that I should view the same way I do the gym. And that like it really is something that there's no reason not to work out, one of the most important parts of your body, your brain, and get it out there. And that just because you're doing that, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
It means that, you could go to the gym because you think you need to lose 20 pounds. You can also go to the gym because you know it's good for your stress levels. It's good to get your heart rate going. And so I was able to finally start shifting that perception of, I'm going to stop thinking about it in this sense of like, I need to go because of I'm having these specific thoughts or whatever it may be.
Something's wrong, right? You just touched on, I had a new role at work. It was the most worried I'd ever been. And that's a good enough reason at all. You know, I really like, I want to make sure I bring this up because I was joking. Ethan is certainly in the business world because he used words like stakeholders and looped in. So that's what I was laughing about because shrinks, we don't use those words, Ethan. So thanks for joining us from MBA land. And I really like how you said that, Ethan, because it was like you had a cold plunge and a good night of sleep. And I see that as like, what it feels like to be able to be honest and vulnerable when that's something that we otherwise defend against, and so just to be honest and let those feelings out. I mean, unfortunately, it's more women than men know the experience of a good cry. And I'll tell you what, as somebody who now has a good cry a couple times a week, it feels good. You really do feel relaxed on the backside. And so I'm not sure, how emotional your first session was, but maybe even just the idea of I can get closer to having those moments. I can be closer to being in touch with them. And then this is a really good example today, Ethan, of reasons you might go to therapy is we're just talking about how to be effective within our relationships today. And you might not be like, well, I'm not depressed and I'm not, I don't know, I'm not so burdened, but like, I know that my romantic relationship isn't fulfilling. I know my friendships aren't fulfilling. And that could be a reason alone to want to explore things. So Ethan and I were really fortunate. And you guys have heard me talk about my older sister, Abby, who runs Camp Livingston in Southeast Indiana, where Ethan and I first met, overnight summer camp, where we both were fortunate enough to be able to go away from our parents overnight, 4 weeks at a time from when we were both very young, age 6 or 7, right, Ethan? So we talked about this before the show, how having that opportunity really blessed both of us and any of our friends who went to overnight summer camp with a really good skill set. Ethan, what do you think it was about camp that helped you be prepared in whatever way you think?
Yeah, I'd say an easy way to conceptualize it is, you have your friend group growing up in your hometown, and you get to go through a lot of really, really meaningful milestones of getting older. You get to literally learn with them in school, but it's kind of like there's so much rigor to a lot of the learning and growth that you're doing, in the sense that it's like everybody's doing it. Everyone's going to math class. Everyone's going to the history class. And it's like, at that age, more often than not, I'd say a very high percentage, it's kind of just like, oh yeah, like I went to English today and I learned the meaning of chapter 14 of Jane Eyre. Really hard for me to get that fired up about. Yeah, I don't know. I'm throwing that one out there because I did.
Good random.
But yeah, I didn't like that one that much. But with that said,
I Sparks notes my way through senior year of English. I didn't read any Dr. Zhivago, whatever we read, none of it. Zip zil zero.
And look where you're at. It's all good.
Clouds valedictorian of Reading High School. Didn't read any books senior year. There we go.
But so I say that because camp was as you put it, like, I was fortunate to do that, right? And it's not that camps don't exist, in someone's local community, and it's not that those camps that do aren't, important and meaningful and impactful in a child's growth. But I'll tell you, like, there's the rush of just a sleepover with a friend in your hometown, and I wasn't good at that. I would often get, my parents were the parents. I'd get a call. I don't really get it, because it seems like the last 3 times Ethan has a really bad stomach ache and needs to go home, which was me just freaking out and he didn't go home. But I mean, my first time at camp, I'm away, and like, you're all of a sudden in this setting where it's not this like forced system of having to meet people, interact with people, learn about things that, to a kid aren't necessarily exciting. And so I'd say camp is something that allowed me to, for the first time ever, get my first taste of there's different kinds of friends. And I think
kinds of friends, yep.
And I don't think that's always that easy to even people that are in college, and even people that are our age in our 30s now.
Yeah.
To like, you can understand what the what is when I say that, but the why and the how, I think, aren't necessarily that easy, like appreciated.
Just like the depth. I mean, again, to think about this, we're all sleeping in a cabin. There's 12 of us for 4 weeks. You have nowhere to hide. And so the depth of those friendships is going to be there because there is nowhere to go. And so I feel like those connections very early on mimicked more of my adult friendships that have come without the kind of roles that we find ourselves in with people when we're young. So this wasn't like our childhood friends. It wasn't our family. So we didn't come into them. And I know a lot of people, camp was an opportunity for them to shed whatever kind of vibes they had at school. So maybe they weren't as popular, quote unquote, or they weren't as cool, quote unquote. They could come to camp, be embraced all the same, and be able to really feel special in a way that traditional places might not have allowed for a younger kid or even into their early adolescence. So another thing, Ethan, that it really taught us on was independence. Like, age 6 or 7, we were thrown with a giant wooden trunk onto the bus, and it was like, good luck. And if you think about that nowadays, could you imagine a parent leaving a kid? I mean, they don't have phones at camp still, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so to separate a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old from their phone for 4 weeks to allow them to decompress, it's honestly, it's easier on the kids than it is on the parents who really struggle with that detachment. And that's our generation of parents. But it really does give an opportunity to foster growth and independence. Like, I had to keep track of how many clean shirts I had. I had to blah, blah. Just little things like that when you're 6 or 7 that you're not doing if you never leave home.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's that specific, very specific reference of keeping track of clean clothes.
I was just thinking, whatever. I was going to say laundry, but we didn't do laundry. Or we did laundry at my home, I guess. Yeah.
We did. It's still the same idea, but I think I know for a fact, absolute fact, I would have been my end of high school going into college experience and like my ability to acclimate to that world would have gone so differently, so differently if I didn't go through camp and building relationships in that capacity and like from that angle, because genuinely I had some great friends in elementary school and high school, but with no doubt I keep in touch to almost every single close friend that I've had since 2000 from camp, as opposed to I really, I'm in a fantasy football league with my close friends from, elementary school, junior high, high school. And it's fun. It's really fun. And it's a good time when, you get to see them. But it's interesting to think about, there can be some core friend groups when you're younger in school, but you're forced into it. You can't like just go to a different school because your parents put you in a school that's in a neighborhood and community. Camp, that's your pack. Like these are people that like you realistically built a strong relationship and basis on that made sense to you, and you got to choose that. And I think that's why it's can be so much more meaningful and long lasting, and ultimately have been impactful on our lives, going forward.
As was very popular on the internet a couple weeks ago, because of summer camp, I'm not afraid to walk around barefoot. So I don't mind. You also at Red Rocks. That's how I walk around Red Rocks with no shoes on. Anybody from my childhood knows that my feet are not pretty, and that is a Ural's problem. So we'll continue to be barefoot because that's what Camp Livingston taught us. It's all good. Just mind out ticks and Lyme disease because we're from the Midwest. So I want to get into the topic, Ethan, because we could just small talk about the Bengals and how Burrow's taking us back and all that stuff all day. But I think a lot of people will be relieved to know that this is the last DBT block, which means you're not going to have to look at any worksheets, at least for a little bit. All right, homies? So interpersonal effectiveness is us coming to an end. It's a really complicated set of words to basically just say, we want the way we talk and the way we act in relationships to be better, to get done what we want them to get done, to succeed how we want to succeed. So when we think about this, to pit stop first, what are we going to learn? Ethan, you and I are successful socially. It is a skill we both have. We are blessed with silver tongues. Yeah, and not everybody's like that. So I remember meeting friends here in Denver during psych residency who would say to me, socializing is not that easy for everybody. Or, that I can't just like wing it like you do. And that was a moment that made me think, when you look at this sheet here, you can say that the question that you're supposed to ask yourself going into an interaction is, what is your goal? What is your priority? For people that are socially skilled, they don't really think about, or at least I don't, what is my goal going into this conversation, because I can wing it. So I want to put on people's radars that it is good, before you have a tough conversation, to think about, what do I want to get out of it? And how can I go about doing that? And that's what this module is going to teach you is, all right, here is my goal. We'll go through those goals in a second. And here are some steps to make sure that we accomplish those goals. So I'm going to list the different topics we're going to go into. Again, if you're watching this, which is my preferred method of people consuming the podcast, there's going to be acronym skills up on the screen. So an acronym, GIVE, Dear Man, FAST. We're not going to go through those. We're going to talk more generally about the topic and give examples from our lives. And so number one, Ethan was just referring to So the first thing we're going to talk about, Ethan was actually just referring to this really well, is a lot of points of our relationships can be keeping and maintaining healthy relationships.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about getting somebody to do what you want, not in a shady way. This is getting somebody to do something we need them to do to get their help. Maintaining our self-respect, saying no when we otherwise might struggle with that. And then other topics that we're going to touch on, self-advocacy, so asking for what you want and saying no, learning how to reduce conflict and anger and build empathy. All right. So the first thing I want to think about, Ethan, is why people might struggle with this. And so there's a number of reasons why we might not communicate as we want or as best we want. So sometimes it's a lack of skill. You know, Ethan, it's not like it's necessarily not hard for either of us, but we were both born with some skills in how to communicate. Other things that might stop us from getting what I want or what we want in our conversations is our own thoughts. You know, if you're worried about somebody liking you, then you're going to have a hard time asking them for help because you don't want to be a burden. They're so cool. They must be so busy. I respect them so much that they don't think I'm important. So our thoughts block us from doing that. Our feelings block us from doing that. You want to ask your boss for a raise. Well, you need to come in there confident. You need to come in there looking good. You need to come in there looking secure, right? And so we all know that feelings, sadness, anger, shame, anxiety, they stop us from communicating as best we'd like. You might not be able to achieve your goals because you're not sure if that's what you really want. And of course, the environment can definitely impact us. So those are just some things to think about. If you're having a tough time communicating, take a pause and think, what's getting in my way? What's stopping me from getting what I want out of this situation? Ethan, can you think about anything like looking at that list or from your mind? Like what kind of things tend to stop you from communicating effectively?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? Because I think this kind of goes to a couple of your points. If you know that you want something, and you know whether it's in your personal world or professional world, you still have to be able to set yourself up to be successful when you are communicating that to the other party. And so I say that because whereas it's important for you to communicate with somebody on a level of empathy that will at a minimum resonate with that person, I think you have to go that extra mile further. Not even a mile, like honestly, a few feet further. In the sense of like letting them know not just that you're able to connect to them on an intellectual level or an emotional level, but that they can trust you, right? That you want to hear their response. And so I think
It's doing a great job. No, you're doing a great job just going into, because I think this is the biggest thing for you, Ethan, because you've talked about this particular concept from a general point twice now. So to Ethan, it's very clear he's in the business world. Building and maintaining positive relationships is extremely important for him. I'm a shrink. Of course, I also need to be doing things with my patients. So the acronym here about how to build good relationships, Ethan's touched on. We want to be gentle. We want to be kind in how we communicate. We want to show that we're interested. We want to validate people's emotions. Again, practice, practice, practice. That's everywhere. And we want to be relaxed. Smile, humor, good eye contact, all those important things. An example that I wanted to talk about, Ethan, you really hammered on keeping long-lasting relationships was an example. Also, flirting. This is the mindset you need to be in when you're flirting. Okay, so we want to go gently, confident, not cocky. Those are the differences. Show interest, ask questions, make eye contact, and validate, validate, validate. So that's what I thought of when I thought of this. Any other things that it makes you think of? Or I know you've been locked up for a little bit, but even when you're flirting with your partner, these are very similar things.
Yeah, no, I think, I have a buddy that has always said the best pickup line, and he used this at the O patio at Ohio State, probably 2,000 times that I literally saw. You said the best pickup line in the entire world is one word, and it's hi. And it's just being able to let someone know that you're not like trying to be creepy. And so I think like, having those types of conversations are something that can allow somebody to get to a point that like they just want to talk. And I think when it comes to like going back to your flirting point, like it's kind of funny. Like it's the same idea even with my partner, where like we have fun every time we're having a chat because it's playful, it's fun, it's talking because we want to, not talking because we have to. And I think that that's another element of flirting, like just to use that as the example, because I think it resonates strongly with a lot of people listening here. Like, don't overthink it. Like, at the end of the day, you're flirting with a guy, a girl, whoever you may be. Like, if they can see in you really quickly that you're genuine and you're just like trying to like have fun and be playful and talk, like, you know what? It's probably going to go better than like spitting game, as one might
Reminder
say.
to all the nice guys and gals out there, if someone is giving you their time, that is valuable, and that is a clue that they are likely interested in you as well. So we'll quote, before moving on to the next topic, an important movie in your business world, Glengarry Glen Ross, because if we're ABC, always be closing, we need to make
Always be
sure that we're
closing.
drawing ADA, attention, interest, decision, action. So if you like that acronym versus this, you can think about that as well. So think about getting someone to do what you want. I always use this as asking your boss for a raise, or Ethan and I also talked about like a group project. Okay. So again, big acronym skills, but the idea here is that we need to be clear, describe, express, assert, and reinforce. We need to communicate clearly. It's not like, hey, maybe you could do this. I need you to do this by this time at this date. You need to be mindful. So with the conversation and able to negotiate, right? We have to have a back and forth. So that's the big thing here is when you're expressing, you do need to be confident. You can't let those worry thoughts get in your way. And we need to make sure that we're mindful and present in the moment. So Ethan, do you think as far as getting people to do what you want, is that something that happens in your work life? Or I would like to find ways to think about this that isn't sounding manipulative.
Yeah. So I think this goes back already to one of the other like topics, which is like have a goal. Like no, like obviously have a goal, but it shouldn't just be quantitative; it's qualitative. Like, and I don't want to fixate on the asking for a raise thing, but the
It's a good example, but yeah.
that I would say stems from that is, well, quantitatively, I could know what I want my raise to be, right? Like what's making me unhappy. Qualitatively, like there are many different reasons, right? Like there could be, you could say it as simple as like, well, I deserve it, but it's like, okay, why? Why do you deserve that? So like you need to be able to back yourself up, but like this goes back to, being confident. Like, and so I think that's where people have trouble, because if you approach it from this path of confidence, well, maybe you're not going to do that good of a job at actually like connecting the why your confidence should appeal to the person you're talking to. But then if you come into it with like a very analytical approach, but you're not confident about it, they're going to be like, yeah, I'm not seeing that. Why am I going to give you more money if you're nervous to talk to me about this?
What's it's so true, Ethan. I think that a lot of this stuff I try to point out, with the right practice, maybe you don't need professional help. I'm showing you the worksheets. Guys, there's practice exercises on either end of these. You can be learning all this stuff if you want. If the core of you, like Ethan said, is too anxious to advocate for yourself, is too anxious to ask for the things you want and need, that likely means it's time to be seeking professional help. Yeah, so Ethan was talking about portraying a confidence. If you have worked at a place for 5 years and you feel like you deserve promotion, a raise, more respect, more value within the company, and you can't talk yourself into knowing that and believing it, then it might be time to start working on those things or evaluating whether you belong at that job anymore. So that's some of this core stuff, Ethan, is people walk around struggling, often very nice people, to think that they're worth advocating for. They're much more likely to advocate for someone else than they are themselves. So speaking of which, our next topic is, and it's the same with validating, right? Like all this stuff we're better at with other people. So we're kind of moving into, this is all different ways to think about advocating for yourself. A really important one, and remember, guys, that this is, this workbook is for teenagers, but Ethan and I are going to have examples for how this can show up in adulthood also, which is maintaining your self-respect. So this looks like peer pressure. So you can see the cartoon here is this girl walking away from a bunch of people offering her drugs and alcohol. No thanks, I'm good. We want to stick to our values. Someone asks you to do something you're uncomfortable with, breaking the law, drugs and alcohol, taking on too much at work. any of these kinds of things that you know at your heart are not going to treat you well, we need to be able to take a step back and say, is this what I want? Is this going to be good for me? We don't apologize. We should not be sorry for existing in this world. I love to cut people off when they apologize and say, what are you sorry for? For like standing there when you almost bumped into me? Like, we're just existing in space. It's okay. People are taught very early on to literally just apologize for existing. And it's sad, but we know a lot of people who that's their go-to. I'm so sorry. Hey, we got to be able to be confident, right? Stick to our values and be honest. So if somebody says, hey, try this, we will use such a funny example of like high school drug influence. Hey, try this thing. Well, I want to go off to college and this is maybe going to impact my brain. So you say, no, thank you, not my thing. And you just keep it moving. We need to be able to be honest and confident in what our values are. Ethan, I know we talked about FOMO as another example of being able to maintain your self-respect.
Yep. So, real quick, actually, I want to say something.
Oh, yeah.
So last summer, I was blessed and lucky to have some amazing friends that gave me the chance to have 3 international weddings. I had one in Tel Aviv, I had one in Florence, and I had one in Ibiza. And something that I really noticed over around 8 weeks abroad last summer was what you were just talking about, which is the amount of times in America, I'm sorry, or excuse me, but it's like an apologetic excuse me have been used. And so I think for anyone that's listening, I really encourage you to really try and be aware of how often you actually hear someone say, I'm sorry, or excuse me, because the idea is like, what I noticed in Israel and in Europe, they don't say that. And if you say that, they're like, for what? Like
in Israel, they definitely don't. Yeah.
No, they do not. But like, it's just, it's something to note because I think there is this stigma of this like anxious setting of like, oh, I'm sorry. Or of course the Midwestern, I have to call that out, but
yeah. And we even noticed that even like when I'm interacting, and the company I work for now is based out of New York City. So a lot of my coworkers are New Yorkers. Yeah. And that happens. And New Yorkers are so frustrated with Midwesterners because they can't, they're better at advocating for themselves than we are. The South, right, with the bless your heart kind of passiveness. And so it is cultural, the ability to advocate for yourself. And so especially in cultures that are more like matriarchal, you really aren't necessarily free to make decisions in a way you'd like growing up. So this idea of advocating for yourself is something that has to be taught when you're young. And if not, it is a skill to build upon.
Yes. So to your earlier question, it's something that Steve and I were talking about earlier. There's peer pressure that has existed for people probably since, elementary school. Let's go sneak out and TP a house. And you're like, I don't know if I should do that. And they're like, oh, you're a loser. You're not fun.
Right.
So and then it keeps building and building, right? And it gets to drinking, drugs, going out late, college, and definitely beyond college, like young professional life to being in the middle of your 30s. But it really got me thinking that I am equally as guilty, if not more guilty, of what I think I had a realization on of like kind of like this innate peer pressure, right? That is FOMO. And my sisters told me since day one, I'm the king of FOMO. And that's why I have always kind of been this social butterfly and have always wanted to just, be a yes man. But to me, I've really started to realize that a yes man mentality is actually peer pressure, and it's not so much FOMO. My biggest realization from a lens of FOMO is that at some point it's not feasible, it's not healthy to think that I am the person that should always be at the 5 a.m. nights in conversations, because I've put myself in positions at times where I feel bad if I'm not. And that's
Right.
that's not normal. If I may, like,
It's
it's
one
not
of
that's
those
not normal. It's
things
not
we
healthy.
really, right. Healthy was why I heard and reflected on that. Like, the people pleasing is a great example, Ethan, which it seems like it's been adaptive for you because it's kept people close to you. But then as we get older, we dig inside and realize, like, well, what am I getting out of these relationships? Is it balanced? Is it worthwhile? And so I'm sure you have, as any young adults do in their 20s and 30s, start to balance, like, am I getting what I need out of these relationships? Uh, am I really benefiting from them? And are they equal? Are they reciprocal? So when we're thinking about how to do that kind of thing, and Ethan made a really good point there of like, am I the one putting these roles on myself? Is anyone really expecting this of me? And more importantly, will the friends in my life be cool with me saying no? Because you brought up bullying as a love language, Ethan. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about when we're talking about Midwestern boys. Oh, don't be a bitch. Don't be a pussy. I'm using those terms on purpose, right? Because this is stuff that is still happening. And frankly, it's still happening amongst guys our age. This idea that I'm going to be shamed into doing something that I do not want to do. Recently as last night, I was at a bar here in popular Rhino district of Denver, and these friends met some new people, and these mixed gender group, were trying to get this guy to go hit on a girl. Oh, come on, like, don't be a bitch. You'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And I looked at all of them and said, do you guys see that how you're going about this isn't working? He's not going to stand up right now and like do it because you almost made him feel bad about himself. I put my arm around this new guy, Nick, great guy, wearing a Fred Again shirt. Young people like you, Ethan, love Fred Again. And I was like, hey, dude, do you want to go hit on this girl? And he's like, no, not really. I'm really stoned. I'm fine. And I was like, all right, well, will you tell these motherfuckers to back the fuck up so we can move on? And so then everybody got kind of like weird. And I was like, well, you were all just like yelling at your friend. He was not having a good time. So like, sorry to be the random shrink passing out stickers at the bar, but like, it wasn't fun. It didn't look fun. He didn't want to be involved in that. So I'm not trying to like save everybody. I just would have loved that guy to have been able to be like, hey, we're fucking chilling. Leave me the fuck alone. And that's the stuff that I've had to work on. You've had, we've all had to work on.
Yeah, no, and I'd say that speaks to the 2 points I was going with. Like that, in my opinion, that was like, you really highlighted both this, like, the peer pressure element, but like, there's a reason why I said there's a couple reasons why, like, that guy also could have like spoken up for himself, right? Like, that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's easy, but there probably still is in some capacity, like this, like, well, what if I did actually talk to that girl? Like,
Sure.
that's kind of FOMO, but that's a FOMO thing. And so I think for myself, at least, like, I have over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 years, like, certainly allowed myself to say no more, right? Like, and now granted, I have a beautiful, wonderful partner, and it's like made it also more fun for me to just stay in and be able to hang out, have some quality time. And by all means, do I succumb to peer pressure? Do I absolutely indulge in my FOMO and be like, no, I want to go have a night. I want to get out there. Yeah. And I'm going to keep doing that. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay with allowing myself to continue to have fun in ways I want to have fun. I think the biggest difference is the ability to take a step back and go like, okay, like, I it's not just that I want to chill out. I need to, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's the hard part socially. If you're not cool with talking to your friends, and that's where I would say, like, you owe it to yourself as an individual that likes to go out, likes to party, drink, drugs, music, whatever floats your boat, to recognize that every single person in your friend group has had and is currently experiencing a moment of probably being like, I really, really don't want to go out tonight. I want to be in bed, or I want to watch TV for the next 8 hours. And if you're able to realize and acknowledge and accept that that's realistically true, like, because it is, then, like, own it. Just own it. And, I think you'll notice a very quick change in the way that you're able to navigate kind of like social life.
I really think self-advocacy is amongst the most important things I've learned through this journey of mine, and teaching that to young adults and to young teenagers that I work with. just your thought of describing staying in remind me of one of Little Dicky's early videos, Staying In, where he's Friday night and he's staying in. So, this is all in the link tree, guy. We're not going to go through every one of these examples, but I really do. I want to share this one more time and show you that when you're thinking about a situation where you know that you want it to be going differently, you want to ask for something, or more importantly, you want to say no. Think about this acronym is worth learning. Be fair to yourself, fair to the other person as well. In this type of situation, it's most likely ourselves we're not being fair to. We do not apologize for wanting to be treated well. We do not apologize for not wanting to get railroaded at work. Fuck them. We stick to our values. Ben talked about values last week. What's important to you? Time with your friends, time with your family, doing causes that that mean a lot to you. And we need to be truthful. So if you're acting in these ways, you know in your heart that you might need to cut off a friend who doesn't support you. You might need to leave a shitty job. You might need to end a bad romantic relationship. These are the questions we need to ask ourselves is, am I being fair when I'm honest and not apologizing and not letting my own brain tell me I am or am not worth the thing that's making me feel shitty?
Yeah.
Much easier said than done. Much self-advocacy, much easier said than done. Yeah.
And I would say the word fair, and this is something I've learned across intimate relationships and also friendships, is a two-way street.
Yeah.
And it's hard to accept everything you just said, but I think it becomes easier when you're able to have an appreciation and an understanding of, whereas you need to be fair to yourself. If there's a negative thing, external factor, some stimulant that is causing you to be in an unfair position to yourself, you're actually probably realistically not really being a great friend or communicator to who else is on
not
that
being
other
honest
side.
Let's say somebody comes to you and they talk about their, let's say, emotionally abusive, shitty boyfriend comes to you as a friend, shitty. Oh, yeah. If you're not telling them that the behavior, like your value of not being treated like that, if you don't say to them, this is unacceptable, you should not be tolerating that. Like you said, Ethan, we don't validate bad behavior. You're not being a good friend if you're not really helping them. And if you're just stuck in your own mind going, like, that doesn't feel like a fulfilling interaction because you didn't get it off your chest. They didn't really get much growth out of that interaction. So it's tough to do.
And, I think, Steve, this kind of brings me full circle to your first question, which was like my experiences with therapy. And so, what this makes me think about is one absolute fact that I couldn't have known how meaningful and impactful this element of therapy is, which is I love being a friend that is there to listen. I want to be somebody that can either, help, give advice, perspective, guidance. I'm not qualified to do that other than I love somebody, right?
A lot of people on the internet aren't qualified, Ethan. You're doing fine.
For sure. But I'm just saying, like, I'm not, like, I don't have, any actual skill set in that regard, or I should say education. But I want to be a good friend. But what I think I wish I could make so easy for people to like experience and see more than anything is that the feeling of just talking to someone that is unbiased about anything is awesome, especially when they are educated. They have their degrees and they've seen 10,000 of you. And to them, it's like, oh, yep, shit. I know exactly, I can totally like get it. Like, I hear you. I have no idea who you're talking about personally, but like, here's what I can tell you based off of the 10,000 times I've had this one conversation. And here's also different ways it's like been received both by that person or someone that they're talking to. So that was the first thing that like, I was like, oh, okay, I didn't really think about that. Your best friend who wants the best thing for you, they might actually, outside of being someone that's there for you to vent, really might not give the best advice because they're biased. But like they're not meaning to be biased in like a malicious way, but they are because they love you. And they might have a side and a feeling already. Whereas a therapist Doesn't. So that was like the first big thing. I'd say the second big thing was the ability to talk to somebody like a therapist and just open up in a manner that it didn't feel like I have a problem. It's more of like, oh, I want to lose 8 pounds in the gym and maybe get 2-pack abs instead of just a dad bod, right? Like, well, I got to do something to get there, but I don't have a problem. Like, I'm not like, physically unwell and whatnot, but I'm doing it because I know that helps. And so once I started thinking about therapy in that capacity, where it was just like, oh yeah, sick, it's Monday at 6 p.m., which I have tomorrow with my therapist, like, can't wait. Why? Because I go to the gym anyway. Now I'm going to the gym for my brain.
It's prevention. I think a lot of people think that we need to get to therapy when there's a capital P problem, which is, hey, that's a good way to start. But what you're describing is why most people go to the gym, which is maintenance. I don't want you to pull your hamstring.
Yeah.
So you need to be stretching every day. And so when these tough situations come to you, we cannot control when conflict comes into our lives for the most part. And so you need to be practicing, again, honesty, communicating clearly, being vulnerable, all the things that require you to be mindful in a moment and succeed. So Ethan talked about his therapy, and what does therapy require from us, Ethan? It requires homework, which nobody likes, and yet it's 1 hour a week, Ethan. If you were only practicing those skills on your Mondays at 6 p.m., you would not be successful. So I want to show everybody any of these skills would be fodder for homework this week. What I would like us to work on is called think skills. And this is the idea of how to build empathy and understanding. A situation that you were pissed off in, all right? You didn't understand what was going on in front of your face. How were you processing it? And the skills below. I want you to practice thinking about what that conflict was from the other person's perspective. Having empathy is our H. So what might they have been feeling? Interpretations. I want you to list as many ways as possible that the other person might have been interpreting the situation that led to conflict. Noticing what the other person was trying to do to diffuse the situation and reapproaching that situation with kindness. So those are your think skills homework, and likely the last workbook type homework I'm going to give you guys for quite some time. So you're welcome. All of these moments are worth reflecting on. If you have conflict with somebody, it is appropriate to take a step back, take a breath, and whether you're a parent, a coworker, a friend, a romantic partner, if you do not come back and hash out what happened, you're never going to be able to forgive one another. You're just going to sit with it. So that's why I want people practicing this stuff, because the more we push things under the rug, the more we don't talk about our conflict, we don't understand the other person's point of view, and we aren't truly able to forgive and forget. Ethan, you're a blessed, interpersonal, effective communicator. It was great to have you on. What's your record prediction for the Bengals this year?
I genuinely, sorry?
It's a 17-game schedule.
Yes, no, I feel I really don't want to accept anything less than 13-4, and I have high expectations. Joe Burrow's back, baby. We got Marshall Matters Burrow right now. He's looking great. I want our team to I don't even want to say the team name, but I need to go 2-0 against that other team in Cleveland or in Ohio. Excuse me.
I've had Browns fans talking a lot of smack considering
they
how
love doing it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Like when's the last
cognitive dissonance we'll learn about how Browns fans have been able to think they're good, and continue to root for the team with Deshaun Watson as the quarterback. Cognitive dissonance. So
that's right.
Ethan, I'm like 11-6 realistic. If we have a starting right tackle who's not hurt by the time this airs, that'll help. All right, y'all, we're going to induct another Bro Motions Hall of Fame member and wrap up the show. Talk to y'all soon. All right, y'all. So I may be dating myself a little bit here, but that meme was super popular in 2011, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is the feeling of judgment. And let's start with that really popular video. 1, the cat's hilarious. 2, look at the vigor with which she's feeling, the feisty, the energy with which the feeling of judgment brings out of people. So I want to think a lot today about the word judgment, what it means, how we use it, and how we can use it more constructively, both for the judger and the judgee. Fun fact about that video that led to the very popular cat meme, she's actually not saying, don't judge me. She's saying, you don't know me. So fun fact, go back and watch it, but I thought that video was good to start. So judgment, you hear this all the time. We all know this. We all feel it. We have all reflexively said in the midst of a conversation, don't judge me, or I'm feeling judged, right? And what's so interesting about that word is that we use it as if the word carries meaning when really it is a feeling. The feeling of judgment. It brings out major responses. It brings out a lot of big feelings in us. But at the core, it's not that helpful to either get help when you're the judgee or to receive feedback when you're the judger in a situation where it's a one-on-one situation. So why I bring this up is because it's worth knowing that when we react strongly to somebody, quote, judging us, it brings up all our own bullshit. It blinds us from the truth. We carry all our baggage into that feeling of judgment. And it's the same when you're the judger. You bring all your life experiences, all your biases, everything you've ever been told that you believe to be true, you bring into that moment for both parties. We feel judged, which is different than being judged. When we're being judged, we have a lot more evidence. We have more fact. We know that the person across from us doesn't agree with what we're saying, that they have judgment around our own opinions, our own policy choices, maybe, again, religion, politics, all these different things that people tend to disagree about. So we might know what it feels like to be judged because you've had the conversation, you know it. I'm talking about feeling judged. So what do we want to do when we end up in a feeling where we're feeling judged? We want to slow it down, just like we've been learning through the DBT block this whole time. Because what's again happening is we want to make sure we can check all our own biases and understand what's happening here. Okay. So I'm going to use a bunch of quotes as we go here from famous people. And so this quote, every day people judge all other people. The question is whether they judge wisely. That's by Orson Scott Card, who wrote the Ender's Game science fiction series, growing all over, all sorts of bros, remember? So we need to think about, why am I feeling judged? Is this feeling wise? Is it a wise mind feeling? Are we being rational? Are we being emotional? Are we being wise? Because what I would need somebody to do when I have a patient that says to me, I'm feeling judged, or when I'm in just like a regular social situation and someone asks that, I ask them, can you be more specific? Just like we learned with crazy last week, because I'm not sure what it means when somebody's feeling judged, especially one of my patients. So I ask them, do you think that I think? So does the judgee think that the judger thinks about them XYZ in a more actionable, concrete language? In general, what is the core feature here is that we're feeling shame. Shame is the core reason that we feel judged because, again, we're carrying all our own bullshit into that moment. What I would ask somebody to do is, if they're in a situation where they feel judged, I want you to say to the judger, the way you said that makes me feel like ... The way you said that, the face you made has me feeling ... Examples: somebody at work doesn't agree with a point you make. The way you said that makes me feel like you don't value my opinion. Or another example, you walk into a room and you feel like people are looking at your outfit and making faces. You would say, hey, that face you made has me feeling pretty insecure about myself. Is like what I'm wearing or how I look? What drew that out of you? So that we can slow it down, and we can, instead of using that feeling of judgment, we can be curious. We do not want to push this feeling of shame away. We want to, as we learned with opposite action in episode 12 last week, we want to step into that shame. We want to do the thing we're not wanting to do, which is when you're feeling shamed, when you're feeling judged, you want to be as small as possible. Or for some people, as we learned from the Real Housewives, they freak out, which is another great, fair reaction to feeling that way. So opposite action would have us stepping right into that and saying, this is making me feel bad. What is going on here? And so in your own mind, when we have time, and this would be a great way to use journaling or your own therapy to reflect on why I felt so defensive. What is it about my own life? Did you have certain experiences that were judgment around your choices, around your clothes? If you were bullied as a kid for not dressing well or speaking well or looking cool. All those are reasons that we could feel judged, because inevitably feeling judged means we feel bad about something and we are taking that moment and blowing it up. Just like we learned about cognitive distortions in episodes 3, 4, 5. Okay. So what we want to do is another emotion regulation skill from last week. We just want to ride the wave. Don't do anything about it. Don't blow it up. Don't make it worse. We want to ride the wave of feeling that shame and guilt, and we want to learn from the moment. The advice I give is similar to advice that some other really famous people have given us. So let's take a minute here. You shouldn't throw stones if you live in a glass house. And if you got a glass jaw, you should watch your mouth, because I'll break your face. So everyone knows that line is from 50 Cent. Maybe some of our Gen Z people don't know who that is. Go back. It's great, great stuff. And so 50 makes a good point, which is like, if we're looking at this situation, should we be judging? Should we be putting judgment onto people if we have our own skeletons in our own closet, right? And so Bob Marley gives another quote. Who are you to judge the life I live? I know I'm not perfect, and I don't have to be. I don't live to be perfect. But before you start pointing fingers, make sure your hands are clean. So doesn't matter if you're writing science fiction novels, reggae, or hard rap. You know, we want to make sure that this is everybody. Everybody's had that feeling. So what I would ask people to do in these moments, whether you're the judgee or the judger, is if you're feeling judgmental towards somebody, or if you're feeling judged by somebody, we would want to be curious. Instead of judgmental, let's be curious. So why might that person across from you be reacting in such a way? What's their story? Do you know their story well enough to know why they might have reacted to what you said and with their particular words or their particular tone or their particular facial expression? We're going to learn a lot from that if you're able to separate and think about that in a good, productive way. That's curious, not judgmental. If you're the judger and that moment was bad, you didn't like it, you didn't want to be somebody who's making people feel bad about themselves, what are your biases that you brought to that table? When you said that or you made that face, you should really dig deep. It's not that this person across from you reacted poorly. You did something that brought that out of them. And if you're really on the journey to becoming a KGB, then I would ask you to think, like, what was your role in that moment to that person's distress? You don't have to beat yourself up about it. Curiosity is not getting mad at ourselves or judging ourselves. It's just thinking, what happened in that scenario? How can I learn from it? And how can I grow? It's a common word. Nobody's doing anything wrong here. Nobody's being overly sensitive. This is what it is. I've had this experience in both roles. Every person watching this has too. So let's make sure we're doing better and not letting those feelings sit with us. My favorite use of judgment. We'll end with a funnier clip on a serious topic.
Don't judge me, monkey.
Grandma's Boy, top 5 film in the bro culture. Adam Sandler and his crew, Happy Madison. Highly recommend it. Don't judge me, monkey. See you in a sec. All right, we'll wrap up today with learning where we got our information from and what we want to take away from this week's episode if summarized. First, with the Bro Motions Hall of Fame, there's nothing really to learn from Johnny and Matthew's death, as tragic and heart-wrenching as it is. So we'll take away, don't drink and drive, not once, not ever. As we transition to our interview with Ethan, for interpersonal effectiveness, we can summarize this as we can plan ahead of time for what you foresee being a difficult conversation. And it is worth your time to learn these skills that we discussed to be able to take a confidence and a plan into difficult conversations. We use the same DBT book for the last time. Congratulations, y'all. If you've been doing your homework, you really did a worthwhile amount of work that should really help you slow it down, both now and all the way into your future in parenting, relationships, every role that you serve. Finally, we talked about judgment and feeling judged. Let's take away that quote that hits so hard. When we're feeling judgmental, let's try to be curious instead. We're going to learn more, feel less, understand, and grow from those moments much more. So I owe Ben Feisel, who is the author and brain behind tinybuddha.com and his socials all over the place. Go look him up. Really good stuff. We've already talked about how we like Buddhism as a stance on this show for how to live and how to be. Shout out also the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and Grandma's Boy, two opposite ends of the pop culture spectrum, both good and teach us about things in either way. So as we go on to the world this week, team, let's remember we're going to be kinder and gentler and try to bring that into our everyday interaction. So I'll see y'all next week for the Male Therapist Roundtable, a very exciting concept that I'm really looking to introduce, where we're going to have a male psychiatrist, psychologist, LCSW, and LPC. If that doesn't mean anything to you, those are 4 different types of people that you'd call therapists. We're going to explain to you the difference between them. We're going to talk about what it's like to be a male therapist in a world where 75% of all therapists identify as female, and specifically do things like talk about masculinity. What have we learned from working in this field? What have we learned about ourselves and about our patients? So really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great time. Thank you, Grant, Lee, and Luis for joining me for that. So, all right, y'all, remember, kinder, gentler. See you next week.